This IB revision guide with Mr. Phillips, and today I'll be looking at integration of systems, particularly focusing on the control of heart rate, breathing rate, and digestion. So hopefully by now you understand the idea of nervous system and hormone controls. And just to go through, in case you haven't done it previously, the series of events that happen in a heartbeat. So a heartbeat is initiated in the sinoatrial node, which is in the top right atria. The sinoatrial node initiates a wave of electrical activity which goes across the atria, causing the atria to contract. They then hit a non-conductive area at the bottom of the atria, which then means the electrical activity has to go via the atrioventricular node. This then has a delay which allows blood to empty from the atria into the ventricles before sending the electrical activity down the septum of the heart, down a specialized tissue called the Purkinje tissue. It reaches the base of the heart and then goes up beside the heart where the contraction starts, and it pushes the blood up and out of the ventricle. This is all part of something called the cardiac cycle. So the cardiac cycle is split into three areas. First of all, you have ventricle and atrial, ventricle are relaxed and the atrial contracts in something called atrial systole. And this is when the atrial volume gets smaller because of the contraction, increasing the pressure in the atria, forcing blood into the ventricles. The ventricle pressure then starts to increase as it fills with blood. The atria then relax and you get ventricular systole, which is where all four valves shut. The ventricle volume pressure increases because the volume decreases, and it becomes higher than the aorta and the pulmonary artery. The lunar valves will eventually open, allowing the blood to leave the ventricle and out via the aorta or the pulmonary the pulmonary artery. Then you have diastole, where both parts of the heart relax and start to fill, and the blood comes in from the pulmonary vein and the vena cava and fills the heart. The heart itself is what we call myogenic, so that means it initiates its own heart contractions without needing nervous stimulation. If removed from the body, in theory, it could continue beating. So we need to understand how our body responds to this. So if you look at the idea of someone in an athletic race and how it would respond, your heart rate would increase, your breathing rate would increase, your respiration rate would increase, which is why the other two increase, and you'd have other responses such as temperature control. So how does our body respond to exercise? Well, basically you need more energy. Therefore, your cells in your muscles, let's say in your legs, need more high rate of respiration. So our breathing rate increases to allow more oxygen into the body, into the blood via diffusion through the lungs, and help remove carbon dioxide, the waste product from aerobic respiration. Our heart rate then has to increase to move that blood around the body quicker, ensuring a quicker delivery of oxygen and glucose to the respiring cells. So how is this controlled? Well, the sinoatrial node, as I said, allows the heart to be myogenic, and it is a specialized group of cardiac cells that allow it to act as a pacemaker. But it can be increased or slowed down due to information from the medulla oblongata in the brain. So there are receptors that control the heart rate. Okay, they are baroreceptors, and these basically send information to the cardiovascular center from the walls of the aorta to the carotid arteries. And what the baroreceptors are effectively pressure receptors that detect being stretched under blood pressure. So under low blood pressure, they will cause the heart rate to increase, and under high blood pressure, they will cause the heart rate to decrease. There are also chemoreceptors in the heart, in the blood vessels, in the carotid arteries and the aorta, and these detect chemical changes. The chemical change they detect is a drop in pH, because if you have high levels of carbon dioxide in your blood, the pH will drop because it will become more acidic, and really it's carbon dioxide that drives the change in heart rate. But for the course, you do need to know that low oxygen rate and a low pH, which is caused by the high carbon dioxide, increase high rate of heart rate, and a high oxygen level or a higher pH, which means you've got less carbon dioxide, will decrease the heart rate. So exercise will increase that carbon dioxide concentration, and the blood pressure will initially drop, which will trigger the activation of your heart rate to increase. So how does this then work? Well, it's due to your autonomic nervous system. So nerves do not involve conscious thought that link to this, and there is an acceleratory center in the medulla oblongata, which will speed up the heart rate by sending a message via the sympathetic nervous system to the sinoatrial node. And these synapses involved here use noradrenaline. If your heart rate needs to slow down, the inhibitory center in the medulla oblongata is connected via the parasympathetic nervous system to the sinoatrial node, and it tells your heart to slow down the heart rate. And this will use the chemical acetylcholine in the synapse. So effectively, you have two areas: your sympathetic nervous system, which will increase the heart rate, and that nerve that connects the acceleratory center to the sinoatrial node is a parasympathetic nerve. It's a sympathetic nerve there, and it's a parasympathetic nerve which will decrease it, and the nerve is called the vagus nerve. The heart rate can also be controlled by hormones, and the hormone adrenaline, also known as epinephrine, will increase the heart rate. And when you need to release this, signals are sent via the nerves to the adrenal gland to release the adrenaline. Adrenaline can actually override most feedback mechanisms and speed up your heart rate much quicker than even nerves impulses. Carbon dioxide then and pH, as said, are the main controls for the heart rate, but they're also the controls for your breathing rate as well. So carbon dioxide has much more of an impact than oxygen. If your carbon dioxide rise too much, your blood will drop in pH, causing something called acidosis. And if your blood pH drops from 7.35-ish to about 6.8, this can actually be life-threatening. So ventilation is the main control of pH regulation in your blood, but your blood also controls ventilation. So here you can see how it all sort of works together. You have the carbon dioxide concentrations and blood pH affecting chemoreceptors, which then tell your brain and the respiratory center to increase breathing, and your muscles then respond by increasing breathing rate. So it's regulated by the respiratory system in the brain, the respiratory center, in the brainstem. Nerve impulses cause contractions then of the diaphragm and intercostal muscles, and this is then detected. So another area that is controlled by the nervous system and through hormone controlling, but mainly nervous system, is peristalsis in the digestive system. This is the movement of food through the digestive system, collectively known as the gut, via muscle contractions. A muscle line in the gut is called smooth muscle, which gives a continuous moderate force, and it is involuntary, so you don't think about this muscle contraction. And basically, if you were to look at the structure of the gut, there is an inner layer, okay, and an outer layer of the gut. The inner layer is made of circular muscles, so it contractions behind the food, so it forces it into the circular muscles, push basically downwards onto the food like that. And it only moves the food forward. The outer layer is longitudinal muscles, so it pushes food along the gut. Now, in terms of controlling peristalsis, the first part of this is swallowing, okay, and that is obviously in one direction away from your mouth. Vomiting uses abdominal muscles, which are not smooth muscles, and that's why it hurts when you vomit. Food in the intestine only ever moves a few centimeters at a time for digestion, and it allows the mixing of enzymes into the food, and then the absorption of food as it travels slowly through your intestines. This is all controlled by something called the enteric nervous system, which has microcircuits so it can control stomach and intestine contractions without input from the central nervous system. So it can be self-regulated in a reflex action. Voluntary gut movements then include swallowing. Okay, so when you swallow your food, obviously you push food back to the throat by the tongue. This is using striated muscle, and when your food reaches the back of your mouth cavity, it stimulates its touch receptors in the pharynx. That then triggers an impulse to the brainstem that stimulates contractions, which makes you want to swallow. And again, that is controlled by the ENS. Once you get to the end of your digestive system, we obviously need to defecate, so the release of feces via the anus through the rectum is here. So the anus contains rings of smooth sphincter muscles, the rectum contains layers of circular and longitudinal muscles. And during defecation, the anus relaxes, so it relaxes the sphincter muscles, which widen, and then the walls of the rectum contract, pushing the food through. And for babies, this is involuntary, but we learn to control these as we get older.